guest expert today is Matthew Moore, Research Director at Moore Probate Research. They specialize in locating missing heirs and beneficiaries. Welcome to the show, Matthew. I'm so glad you could join me today.
Thanks, Remi. Thanks for having me.
I know you locate missing heirs and beneficiaries, but what does that really involve?
Well, there's quite a wide range of things we do. I mean, it really runs from just locating one missing legatee, one missing beneficiary named in a will, all the way up to locating maybe 50, sometimes even over 100 heirs on intestacy, so where there's no will. So there's quite a large range of what we do, you know, very small jobs to very large ones. And that also includes locating people overseas.
And what difference does it make whether you have a will or not?
Well, generally speaking, with a will, we're looking for named people, so we know who we're looking for at the beginning. That's not always the case, but generally speaking, that's the case. Whereas with an intestacy where there's no will, we start off not knowing who we're looking for. We first identify the people who are going to benefit, and then we find them.
Who do you typically work for?
Typically, we work for UK solicitors. But we also work for overseas public trustees and also for the general public, so people who are administering an estate without the assistance of a solicitor.
What should people include in their wills to make their beneficiaries more findable in the future?
Obviously the name, but it should be the name plus something else. It's very hard to find someone if it's just the name. So it's usually a name and address, that's standard. In some cases, if you don't know the address, you can include some other information. So a good example would be a godchild who you may have lost touch with. You may not have a remotely recent address, but you probably know the names of their parents. So you could include something else about that godchild. You know, my godson, Nicholas, the son of X and Y. And that will give us something to start with. So it's a name plus some other information.
And how do genealogists charge for their services?
There's really two ways that genealogists charge. The first, and the way we work, is a time and expenses basis. So a budget is agreed at the outset based on the number of hours that we think the case will take, and we simply charge for the time. There's also the contingency approach, whereby the genealogist agrees the fee with the heir when they find them. We don't work on that basis for a number of reasons, mainly because we think it's unfair that a beneficiary would be asked to sign a contract without all the information in front of them.
How much time does it normally take to locate missing beneficiaries and heirs?
Well, I'd say, as a rule of thumb, I'd say if we were asked to find one missing legatee with a name and a last known address in the UK, it would take us, in terms of our time, probably somewhere up to 2 hours maybe. And to find heirs on intestacy, it could range from 10 hours to 50 hours. That's in terms of the time we spend. In terms of how long it would take from us starting a case to reporting, for a missing legatee, maybe 1 to 4 weeks. And for an intestacy, it could be 3 weeks to 3 months, but give or take, depending on what happens.
What information do you ask for when you're instructed to start a search?
We always say as much information as you've got, we'd like it. You know, it's much better to have too much rather than not enough. But I mean, I've kind of touched on this already, but for someone named in a will, the name and the last known address would be a great start, or the name is something else. For an intestacy, we can really work with almost nothing, you know, a name and a date of birth and nothing else, or even a name and a date of death and nothing else. But the more you can give us, the better. You know, the more you give us, the less we have to find out, and obviously the less time we'll spend.
And if you search and can't find a beneficiary, how can the personal representative be protected?
There's several different things you can do if a beneficiary can't be found. I mean, I would stress that most beneficiaries can be found, but if they can't be found and you've taken sufficient steps, then you can sometimes get a policy, an insurance policy, which covers you should that person turn up. That's not always possible. I mean, for example, a missing son of the deceased is probably not insurable because he could turn up at any time. So there are other options. I mean, you can make payments into court in some cases. Sometimes you could find a charity that would take it, you know, on the proviso that if the person turned up, they'd pay the money back. So there are various options to protect yourself.
What kinds of search can you help with?
Well, I mean, we always say that we can really look for anyone as long as it's either to their benefit or it's for a mutual purpose. So we don't trace debtors, but we can trace missing freeholders. Sometimes you might have a situation where a couple have split up and become estranged, but they still own the property together. So we can trace a missing spouse or partner. We can also get documents. I mean, we quite often have to get documents to enable the administrator or the executor to transfer a nil rate band from one spouse to another. So, there's a wide range of things we can do.
Do you have any additional advice for personal representatives when dealing with an estate?
Personal representatives, executors, etc., don't necessarily realise the kind of responsibility that they're in and the potential personal liability if things go wrong. So I would say, be very certain that you know how to distribute an estate before you do it, particularly on an intestacy. I've seen mistakes over the years, and you really don't want to be trying to claw money back from people who've received too much. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is, if it's an intestacy, you really need to be certain there isn't a will. And there is a thing called a will search which you can do, which will protect you in case a will turns up in the future. It's all about protecting yourself, because you are in a position where if something goes wrong, you could be personally liable.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for joining me today. The service that your firm offers is definitely a lifesaver to those who find themselves in the difficult role of executor or administrator of an estate.
Thanks, Remi. Thanks a lot. Pleasure.
Details of how to contact More Probate Research will be coming up shortly. But first, are you dealing with an estate where there's no will and you're not sure who's entitled? Or do you want to know what happens if you pass away without a will? You can download an intestacy guide that gives you all that information. It's available from my website, remiaiyela.com/intestacy guide. And if you can't locate any of the beneficiaries, you know what you need to do. You need to contact More Probate Research, and here are their details.
Subscribe now for more family wealth guest experts.